Hi, friends. Welcome to my Monday morning message. My heart is so full after the incredible weekend that I had, and I feel so cleansed by the refreshing tears of gratitude and recognition of God's hand in my life that were shed. And I feel so blessed by the new sisters that I gained as I went on this writing retreat. The title that I want to talk about today is The Potter. And I have kind of a connection with this because I love to work with clay. And when I was in high school, my senior year, I wish so much that I had taken it sooner. I decided to take for my art class a hand building pottery class. And I loved building things from clay and just learned the beauty and the joy that comes from creation, from taking this lump of clay that looks like nothing and building it into something absolutely beautiful. And we only did hand building that year, but I decided the next year that I wanted to learn how to use the wheel. And so in college, I signed up for a pottery class, and I took it specifically from this teacher that had been at Rex College for years and was renowned for having amazing classes that he taught really well. And I was so excited to take this class. And then on the day that I showed up, that week they had switched the teacher out and they put a lady in whose specialty was making porcelain dolls, which of course is not even close to the same thing. And so I sat in her class and I watched her work and teach us how to do these things, and I didn't get it. I couldn't understand how she was doing it, and it seemed like she was struggling a little bit with even doing it. And so I took time to go into the labs, and I was trying really hard to throw this pot to make it work. And every time I would try to poke my hole in the middle and pull up the clay, it wouldn't work. It would bend over in itself or fall over, or it would be too thin too quickly. Anyway, I felt very inept very fast and realized that hand building and wheel throwing are not the same thing, even close to the same thing. Well, I am so grateful that there was a student in that class, in that lab, not in my class, in the lab, that had taken pottery for a few years. And I'm so grateful that he was brave enough to ask me if he could help me, that he could see how much I was struggling, and his heart was hurting for me, and so he asked if he could help. And as he came over, he showed me that the very most important thing that you can do when you're throwing a pot is to center the clay. And he taught me where to put my elbows and how to brace my hands, and he taught me how to do that most pivotal point and part of throwing a pot. And as I practiced centering the pot, the work became much easier. And by the end of the class, because I knew how to center my clay, I was able to throw a pot that was functional and beautiful. And I'll show you one of the creations that I made during that class. So I made these. I wanted to make a set of canisters that could go in my house, and at that point I was engaged to my husband. And so I did a design that had both the C for Chad and the O for Olia, and the arrows that showed that we were coming together as one. And I loved what I was able to create once I understood the process. So how does that relate to Christ as our potter? The verse, I found a couple verses with identifying him as the potter. And the first one is in Jeremiah 18:6, and it's him talking to us. And he says, "O house of Israel, cannot I do with you as this potter, saith the Lord? Behold, as the clay is in the potter's hand, so are ye in my hand. O house of Israel. And I think it is so important for us to trust that God knows what he's doing with us, that Christ is our potter, that he holds us as clay in his hands, and that he can do so much more with us if we are willing to be molded, if we are willing to allow him to work in our lives. That he is capable of seeing the potential of what we hold inside us, that he knows what creation is in there that will be most functional in his hands, and that will be most beautiful in the way that he molds it. And when we learn to trust him, he can really make us what we're meant to be. And sometimes that involves breaking us down too. That sometimes what he starts to build with us isn't working. And that is the really cool thing about clay, is that it can even be hardened, but before it goes into the furnace, you can dampen it again and break it back down and start over again. And I know in my life that there have been a few occasions where he has had to break me back down to that little lump of clay in the middle of the wheel and start again. And I've been amazed at how beautiful the new creation is in comparison to what I loved about the old creation. But I am so grateful that he is capable of being able to take us and remold us. And sometimes that breaking down is a little bit painful, but that it has a purpose. And if we will trust him, he will show us what that purpose is. The last thing that I wanted to relate back to my experience in that pottery class is that it is much easier for him to work with us when we are centered. That when we take time to find balance in our lives and make sure that we are doing those foundational things, that reading of our scriptures, and not just reading but studying, finding what those words mean to us in our lives and what they mean as love letters from our Heavenly Father. And when we are praying to him, and not just repetitive words so that we can check it off on our list, but actually pouring our hearts out to him. And sometimes that means yelling and being angry and feeling sorry for ourselves. But he wants to know every bit of us, even our frustrations and our ugly parts, and the feelings that we don't want to share with anyone else. But when we will really share our hearts with him, when we will share every part of us, that he can more easily work with us on that wheel, that we become centered in him. And that as we're doing those things, it makes it easier for him to mold us into what he sees inside of us. So my challenge for you today is to think about what it is that you need to do to become more centered in the potter's hands, to trust those hands, and to trust that he sees a purpose in your breaking down, or the potential that lies within you that you can't even see. And that as you will trust him and center yourself, that he really will make something beautiful of you, and I promise you that. Hi, Elaine. Thank you for joining me. The title that I want to talk about next week is The Refuge in the Storm. And so if you want to study a little bit on that or think a little bit on that, I would love to hear your comments when I post my video next Monday. Thank you for joining me, friends. Olia Goff, signing off. Get hope, get Christ, get anchored.